primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield. Were you waiting for me to finish?
Nope, I forgot what podcast I was on, honest to God, for half a second. Really did. And if you didn't know, listeners, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. They have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year.
Kapow.
And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do. YouTube.com/@241studios. Best place to consume the content. Again, episode 217, I think, not 100% sure. The thumbnail will tell you. We are talking about Hacks, which is a show that I discovered when it was airing on HBO at the time. I think it was HBO Max. Now it's Max. I remember watching the first season as it aired. I watched the second half of the second season, and then I moved, and then I fell off the wagon on it. But I remember really enjoying and just absolutely loving these characters, the story, the writing, everything about it. And a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, Daniel, you mentioned, have you seen Hacks? I was like, yeah, dude, I just gave you that same spiel I just told everyone else. And you caught up all the way to season 3. And so then I like I always do, I have to, show Kimberly a show that I have to watch for the pod in hopes that she will like it so I can continue to watch it at the same time as spending time with her. So it worked, and she ended up really liking the show after a few episodes, took a little bit of wind up there. We got all through the seasons, and then now we're here doing a podcast on it. And I want your general thoughts and reactions about Hacks.
Yeah, I would say Hacks is probably one of my favorite comedies of the last few years. I'm having trouble thinking of like comedies that I would put up next to it. I feel like we grew up on I feel like in the heyday of 30-minute scripted comedies with The Office and Parks and Recreation and 30 Rock and Community and all these amazing shows, even, later on Silicon Valley and all these really hilarious shows. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm just not tuned into as much of the comedy side of things, but I haven't had like a new comedy to watch in a while that's really grabbed me. And this one did immediately. I think the writing is fantastic. The acting is maybe even better. And then I think I think there's an even added element to us as people that are interested in the film industry and kind of follow it. It's very much an inside baseball show, right? It's very much you're kind of seeing sausage getting made on the writing, and especially on the stand-up comedy writing side of things. And I think that's really awesome. I've in the last few years gotten a little interested in stand-up comedy just because there's a lot of good joke writers out there, especially ones that you just aren't big names yet. And I really love following the stand-up comedy subreddits because you'll see just lots of people that are just touring and they've got a following, but they're not getting TV shows yet or writing for SNL or anything. And so it was just, it was fun to see that world a little bit. It was fun to follow these characters. Jean Smart is like an incredible actress, and I think her role, she's just doing so much with it, and it's all been fantastic. I now need to look up the other actress's name. Why did that go away? Hannah Einbinder, I think is probably how you pronounce that. Ava Daniels, she is also fantastic. There's just such a great element of old school and new school, of younger generation learning from the older generation, while the older generation learns from the younger generation. And it's just a really enjoyable, funny, dramatic show. I really love it.
It's one thing I don't know if we've ever talked about, but I too, in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years, have become not open to it. Stand-up was always in my life in some way, and I would watch stuff every now and then, but I feel like the last 2, 3, 4 years, I've watched more stand-up in that time than I had my entire life combined. And maybe it was the pandemic, maybe it was something that kind of attributed to it, I don't know, but that's something that I don't know if we've ever talked about. Like we've never shared ever stand-up comedians we watch or whatever like that. So I've even bought buy albums or sets, whatever, and listen to them in my car, like on big long drives,
that are like shows essentially.
You can buy the show on Apple for like $10 or something, and it's just the audio, right? Back in like the old days, you just put a CD of like Dane Cook or something.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the only comedy album my family owned was Bill Cosby's. So,
Oh, makes sense.
doesn't
Yeah,
it though? Doesn't it
irony,
though?
the irony there.
Oh
Yes, of
my
course.
God, yes, it
Yeah.
is. It is quite yes. No, I
Yeah.
think and it's weird for me. Is like I don't really watch specials. I don't really. I just like I like clips. I'm like kind of
I
this
like
like
specials.
just
I
dancing
like the
around.
structure.
I just want to hear your best joke and then I'll move on, kind of thing. But no, I mean, I think yeah, it's such an interesting world stand up because it is writing, but it's such a very particular kind of writing,
Yeah.
and I also really love like obviously there's a pretty set structure to joke making that has been followed for decades now, but I really also love finding comedians that kind of find ways around that. You know what I mean? And are able to be really funny while telling jokes in a different way. So yeah. Anyway, I'm really starting to appreciate. I think I'm appreciating it more as a craft. I'm realizing that the people that are good at it, how much work and talent and effort goes into that to be that good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well, I
so
think
yeah,
to me, it's become so I've gotten to politics a lot in the last 3, 4 years.
sure,
And well, I guess maybe longer. The last 7 years, I've been really into politics. And God dang, I'm getting old. And one of the institutions I feel like have been that's really had to navigate these waters the last
sure,
few years is the comedy area, and people not telling some jokes, being canceled or potentially canceled for others, and then how are corporations responding to that, and then how are fans and audience responding to it, and then how is the social media responding to it that are not
hmm
fans that have issues with it. So I think all of that has been interesting to me, and just hearing even people talk on a psychological level about how these jokes work, and then also on a social level of like what it means to be able to tell jokes and like how far you can go and X, Y, and Z. I personally think you can go as there is no rope. Like you can go as far as you can for jokes personally.
I don't
But
know. I've seen some of
I
those
do.
James Gunn tweets from 2011. I'm not sure. I'm
Those
not
are not
sure.
are those
Those were
jokes?
jokes. Yes, they were. They were
No, no.
absolutely
I mean,
jokes.
I know what you mean. Like, well, yeah, okay. Here's the difference. I should say this. You're right in the fact that what he's saying is not great. It's pretty heinous, right? The problem was it's not a funny joke. That's the problem. You can go dark and you can go hard and you can go deep, but it has to be funny. That's the difference. And there's a lot of examples of how
Sure.
that kind of content works. And then someone like a tweet, weird X amount of characters, and then also it's a tweet, it's a structure, whatever that just didn't work as a joke. It was just like he was basically
Sure.
just being gross. And then later it's like, oh, I was joking, right? It's like someone, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But, um, and then on top of that, that's what's been interesting to me about comedy in the last few years. And then this show really does also tackle that.
It does. Yeah.
It's a character coming from LA, and if people who don't know, it's a up and coming writer, pretty young, and she's pretty talented. She's also got those pitfalls of probably since she did get talent or she got discovered at a younger age than maybe some people, she's got that ego attached to it. And you're
Sure.
in LA, and so it's a cutthroat society, right? As a lot of us know and or suspect. And so all those things kind of make a dangerous person socially. And so she is basically getting booted for making a bad tweet, right? A bad tweet joke for a
That's right.
politician.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so because it wasn't funny, which I think they even actually mentioned that it would have been okay if it was funny. That's like the
Yeah.
first episode, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, since she made that tweet, she gets attacked and she has to go on the down low. She is forced to go to Vegas to do comedy writing for God, what's the actress's name? Deborah
Gene Smart.
Vance. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Deborah Vance, right?
In the
And
show.
Deborah
Yeah. Yeah.
Vance is like a legacy comedian. Think of her as someone like in Vegas, especially. Think of her like what's some of the most famous Vegas shows you can think of, like an Elvis for
Well,
comedians,
there's a very
basically.
specific. I feel like. What's her name? There's that one of the early female comedians that was really big. She's
Yeah, I can't think.
basically
Yes.
a different version of her. Let's see. It was
Either way, I think
yeah, go
that a
ahead.
good parable is looking at like Elvis, someone who stayed in Vegas for a long time. They, had a huge career up until that moment, and they're kind of now like a legacy Vegas person.
Joan Rivers.
Joan Rivers. Okay, great. Yeah.
She's absolutely a Joan Rivers homage. I'd say.
Yes. And so, like Daniel said earlier, it is essentially a old school meets new school. Um, and one thing that Deborah says throughout all three seasons is that you are just like me, right?
Mm.
And so, and there's ways that Ava, who's played by Hannah, she is like her, in ways she's not like her, and also ways how she's becoming like her, and then in ways that Deborah becomes like Ava. And so,
Hmm.
it's a fascinating show on just how the Hollywood. It's like it's satirical in a lot of ways, but it's like,
Absolutely.
but it's also like this doesn't. If this happened exactly like this, that's 100% how it happens.
Yeah,
Like,
no, well, it's
so
I'm
maybe
not
it's not
sure.
satirical. Maybe it's
It's
just
it's
real.
yeah,
I don't know.
it's funny because it outside of Hollywood it seems ridiculous, but inside Hollywood it doesn't. Most of it, at
Right.
least. Maybe
Yes.
there's a few things
Yes.
with that the agent secretary, which become more and more a part of the show. There's a few times where you're like, okay, that might not happen, but most of the things that happen, you're like, okay, yeah, that's happened to people before. Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. It kind of is an examination of comedy and what makes us laugh and why we laugh. You know what I mean? And I think even digging into the story, right, of like Deborah Vance being this woman that was promised a late night TV show in the 70s or 80s, like really early. And then her life kind of blew up into scandal. And then her coping skill was to go on the road and be a comedian and drag her daughter along with her. You know what I mean? Like, and like, there's so much you can dig into as far as like, I mean, for both of these characters, comedy is their coping skill, is like a safe place for them, right? But the reason they need it or want it is because they're both deeply hurt people. You know what I mean? And I think that to me is like, even when Deborah Vance is saying we're the same, that's what I'm hearing in that, when it's like we're both hurt people that are using comedy to get by. You know what I mean? And I think if you look at most comedians, a lot of them would agree they're the exact same way. You know what I mean? That they're funny, and we, I mean, even in humor as a psychological thing, the fact that people laugh in the face of like disasters is a coping skill. It's a way for them to get past a moment of something that is so overwhelming, they just start laughing. You know what I mean? And so like I think there's such an interesting examination of why we like comedy, of why humor helps us get through hard times, of all of these things. And as well as I think you're right, like just kind of this greater conversation about comedy in general, about popularity, about relevancy, and all of these things. And so it is a very layered show. It's not about one thing. You know what I mean? It's really just about these two people, and they're very layered. They go through very interesting phases in the show, right? Where they feel they change a lot. I feel like, even if they still feel very similar in season 3 to who they were, it's yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really excited for season 4 for sure.
There's I can't find the actual the documentary I'm thinking of. Maybe it's I Am Comic. Maybe that's what it is. But there is, I can't remember. I think I watched like 2010, which maybe it's what it is. I Am Comic. I don't remember. But it is basically a detailed look into like what comedy life is in terms of traveling,
Yeah,
who the people you interact with, and
is that the one where it follows like Jerry Springer, or not Jerry Springer, Jerry Seinfeld
Jerry Seinfeld.
before he's popular? Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. I think
And then
Jerry
it follows like
Seinfeld's in it.
another comedian that's like trying to make it or something like that. But
I
it's like
think so.
follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jerry Seinfeld's more
No,
like
it's
commenting about his
isn't it
history.
about his like it's about him getting back into stand up like years later after Seinfeld. Isn't that what it is? He's
Maybe
like
I don't
he
remember.
was stand up, he did Seinfeld, and then he like retired, and then it's him trying to
Right.
do comedy shows again and trying to go to like New York and like do the things he used
Yes,
to do and like
I'm pretty sure.
examining the
Yeah.
process. I think that's what it is.
Yes. So, but in that they talk heavily, like all these people interviewed and everything else, heavily about like most of these comedians are probably going through a hard time. There's probably something about them that's mental health issues. And that's not all of them, but there
Lots of
is. It
times
seems like a
childhood trauma, you know what I
childhood trauma.
mean?
There is this thing. I made a joke along to you recently or whatever, but like I feel like I've become a better writer because all the bullshit I've went through, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
for a long time I was like, man, I'll never be a good writer because I don't have much childhood trauma. Like
Mm,
nothing that really stood out to me in a way that
sure.
I thought was just pertinent to what everyone else was going through.
Sure.
And so it wasn't until much later I was like, oh, I'm probably can become a good writer now. And so like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
always kind of made
It's
that joke.
interesting.
But I think there's something there inherent about people who are very talented creatively and then living through something hard and having empathy for other people. And I think comedians have the ability to have a lot of empathy, and
Sure.
they have the ability to obviously observation is a huge aspect
Absolutely.
of comedy, and both those things go hand in hand with like directing and writing,
For
and
sure.
it's just
I
like a
mean,
different
the best
type of
movies
muscle.
have comedy in them. They aren't
Sure,
comedies, but they have
sure,
comedy. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
still there's something about we love the unexpected, and like the best jokes are the ones we don't see coming, right? And so yeah, I think that I think that is an element for why this show is so interesting, right? Because it is kind of investigating an industry in that way. That we do. I mean, comics are not they're not ignored people. Comics are usually pretty popular. The top comics are usually well known and
sure,
headline TV shows, get their own shows, whatever. But I think it is fun to watch it, kind of that inside baseball part. And I think, yeah, I think like you said, it is there. These are two people that are deeply hurt, that haven't resolved most of their issues, and they use comedy to cope with that. And I think that's the nature of comedy to some degree. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's how we get through moments that are otherwise difficult to process or whatever. Now I do think, yeah, it is interesting that like, you talk about pain and you talk about like people going through things. And I think, yeah, it's interesting. I wonder what it is. I mean, maybe it's that pain forces us to grow more than comfort does. In comfort, there's really no motivation to grow outside of maybe your own motivations, but like pain forces you to do something, either change or figure something out or whatever it is. And that then gives you a new perspective. And maybe that's where we kind of assume that like, hardship does that. Anyway, yeah, Hacks, man, what a great show. And just to get
It is
back to the plot a little bit, it's this great story of Ava helping Deborah revive her career, make her relevant again. And I really love how like Ava's angle, right? Ava's angle is you should start talking about all the shit you don't want to talk about. You should start owning your life and dealing with it with people on stage. It's real. And she can still be funny just because she's she's a comedian. She's a funny. That's what I said.
That's the
But
title
but
of the podcast now. She's a funny.
good. But anyway, I love that Ava's angle is be more real. Stop pretending, stop acting like you're this person. Like that's not even who you are. Just be real and make funny stuff about that. And I just think I'm like, man, that for one, that just I identify with that personally as an artist. I think any artist that is just tapped into their essence, your art's just gonna be better. I don't care what it is. But man, it's also just refreshing, I think, too, because there's just some elements of mental health baked into that, even just like in terms of like
Yeah,
personal awareness,
of course.
in terms of like how other people see us and how we feel about that. There's a lot of really just kind of self work that these characters are doing that we might, normal people might do in therapy, with a therapist, but they are kind of doing with each other in an antagonistic comedy way. They're very antagonistic against each other. They're sometimes friends and they really do care about each other, but man, they butt heads all the time. And that's just part of their dynamic. But yeah, I love that it's not just well, let's just make you fun and hip again. Let's just make you popular with the kids again. It's let's understand who you are and draw out that kind of the purest comedy that I think there is, which is you dealing with your hardships on stage with a laugh. So I just there's just the writing is incredibly intelligent in the show. It is incredibly layered, and it's just they're just constantly doing a lot with both of these characters, and I think I admire that as a writer and just as a viewer. I think like these people feel very real. Ava and
100%.
Deborah do not feel like caricatures of who they represent. Honestly, they feel like real people that could be in LA and New Vegas, in Vegas right now. New Vegas.
Well, one thing I want to talk about too is that if people don't know yet, they might be thinking this is just a comedy show and that doesn't really interest them. And like, no, this isn't. This is truly an HBO show. And what that
Yes.
means is that yes, there's comedy, there is zingers frequently. There's constantly, like really smart writing and like how we're talking about things, blah, blah, blah. But there is some really heavy and emotional moments throughout this show. And so, and they do that because like you're saying, like the writing is so good in making these people feel real. We care about them. And then when you care about somebody, you're having a good time with them. The zingers are coming.
And
the next thing around the corner is really heavy shit.
Yeah, and you're right. That is interesting. I mean, it is. I mean, it's a dramedy, right? Okay, sure, it's a comedy drama, but it is trying to be funny like 90% of each episode, I would say. Like it's mostly operating in that comedic vein, And I think it is I think that makes those moments pop more when you do have those dark moments, when you do have those moments of despair. And I think it's so cool that again we're talking, this show is about comedy and what makes things funny and what drives comedians, what motivates them, all these kinds of things. And so it makes so much sense, like we talked about, that it should be dealing with dark subjects a lot because that is integral to many comedians. It's integral to many jokes. And so, yeah, you're right in that, like, it's a very emotionally not like you're feeling a lot with these characters, with when they go through stuff and when they talk about the things they've gone through, and it makes you empathize with them hard, I think. Yeah. And so they're very likable. And then the conflict that comes out of that is very funny and very quick. And all of these, I mean, every time Deborah makes fun of Ava's hands, I think that's one of my favorite recurring jokes. But anyway, yeah, I just think,
I mean, comedy is a tool. Comedy is a tool, obviously used throughout the show. It's also a huge plot point of the show. Right. But the show is about two people navigating an industry at different points in their career, and can they come together at the same time? Sure. That, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what it's really about. Is can a relationship survive whilst doing this type of work? And so and that's kind of where we're at. One thing I want to talk about, just because I want to talk about it selfishly, independent of this podcast, I'm gonna give a spoiler warning. One of the downsides real quick is that when we do an overview of the show, we typically we missed out on tons of cool plot details or episodes or fun things.
Sure.
And we typically talk about the ending of something or of a season, whatever, because that's the last thing we watched. Then there's speculation to be had. So in the spirit of that, I want to talk about the finale of season 3. Yes. And if you haven't watched this show, then pause it right now. But make sure or just mute us, actually. That way we can still get the money from the views.
And by the way, it's a short show. They're 30-minute episodes. And there's like 8 episodes a season. So it's like 4 hours of TV per season. It's not a big investment.
It goes 10 episodes, 8 episodes, and 9 episodes. That's how it goes. You're right. Okay. It's such a weird thing. But anyway, now you can mute us. Yeah, so season 3 leading season 4, Daniel. Of course, this is always what's going to happen. Like this was manifest destiny.
You saw it coming in this exact way?
In the last 2 episodes, I was like,
okay, so tell me specific. So to set the stage, right? This is Ava's got her show. She got her night show, and Deborah gets her night show, finally gets it. She tells Ava, "You're my head writer," right? She says, "You can do it." And then a week later, whatever, she basically tries to back out of that. And it's because she's afraid that she will get judged more harshly if she doesn't have like a studio writer.
Legacy staff member.
A legacy writer that's been on every night show since forever. Whatever, right? And so it's her basically kind of succumbing to insecurity and fear. And because of that, kind of fucking over Ava, right?
Yeah.
Ava
is correct in this way. The reason why Deborah has had the success she's had recently is because of their collaboration.
Absolutely.
Right? The wrinkle in it, and I don't know. I think I would do would I do what Ava had done? But
no. So we're just to be clear. So Ava blackmails Deborah because in the course of events, before Deborah is given her Tonight Show, she has sex with the head of the network. Now, it was not at that moment, if I'm recalling correctly, I don't know if it was an intentionally trying to do that in that moment. I think it was just kind of something that happened. She had already been told she wasn't getting it, that it was going to someone else, and so she was just kind of like hitting golf balls drunk or something, and then they hooked up. So it wasn't her using sex to get the job. That's not what happened.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
Ava's basically saying, but it sure would look like it if everyone knew about it. And then my
Right.
favorite line is Deborah says, "You wouldn't." And she says, "I would. Wouldn't you?"
Exactly.
And it's like Deborah says nothing. And it's just like, oh shit.
I mean, she's
In
fucking
fact,
pissed, but I
there's a
know
moment of
that she
respect.
respects. Yes.
And there's a moment you see it where she's like, "I would do that. You're right. I'm proud
Yep.
of you." Like that, you know, that isn't
You know what's
sad.
happening. Yeah.
But
you know
and
what's
then as soon
happening.
as someone walks in, there's like, "Who is this?" She's like, "Well, this is my head writer, Ava." And it's like, yeah, man, just I feel like almost all 3 seasons were building to that moment to some degree,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Like we knew she wanted the late show from season 1, and we knew Ava wanted to be successful with her, all this stuff, and so it was like there's almost a version of this show where it could have ended after that. Like I don't want it to, and I think there's very obvious places for this show to go for more really interesting storytelling with her actually hosting the show and like the trials and tribulations that will be going on with that. But there is like, it does feel like everything was leading to that line to a degree.
100%. I hope we don't. I hope the next season's the last. Anyway, we had some technical difficulties on our end. Not quite sure what happened, but I think it's a good place to wrap it all up. Yes, the show has it all. It has comedy, it has the emotional moments, it's intelligent writing, cinematography is great, the acting's phenomenal, and I'm looking forward to season 4, especially after that season 3 cliffhanger. Yeah, I hope we get more, but I hope it doesn't overstay its welcome as always.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely feels like they've got a kind of lightning in a bottle here where they're really expertly threading a few different needles when it comes to what they're talking about, when it comes to, just, I think they've even done a great job of like, I know I mentioned at the beginning, but like the whole idea of like older generation learning from the younger generation and younger generation learning from the older generation. I think it does a great job of that. And I think that's just a really, maybe, I don't know if noble is the right term, but I think that's just positive. A show that is showing like a large age gap. These two people that you would say have nothing in common, have no, they have completely different spectrum of views on politics, on social, on everything, and yet they continually find they're very similar. And I think that I like shows that don't divide us further, I guess, as like humans. And I think that that's something that to be praised of the show. And so, yeah, Hacks, please watch it. I think season 4 is already coming, right? And there's no speculation there. So, but I think it deserves all of the watching, all of the love. I mean, I do hear it talked about, like there's been some podcasts I've listened to that weren't TV podcasts that talked about it and I really liked it, but I don't feel like I hear it talked about enough. I don't think it's enough, enjoyed by enough people. So go watch Hacks. Yeah. It's three great seasons of television and another one coming.
Yeah, I think ultimately being able to reach across the aisle to talk to people about different opinions is the key to our success in the long run. So that all being said, Daniel, how can listeners write into us?
Listeners, please write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know what you think of Hacks. Are you as up on it as we are? Are you enjoying it like we are? What do you think they're going to do with season 4? I think that there's a lot of directions they could go with this that are, and really, I feel like any of them could work. You know what I mean? I trust these writers. I trust these actresses. Whatever they choose to do it will be amazing. But there's just so many ways it could go, and in my mind, be a really satisfying ending. So what do you think they're going to do with season 4 of Hacks? Write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know.
And if you can't find us at our bit.ly, you can always find us in the comment section below, youtube.com/@241studios. Again, it's the best place to consume all the content. Daniel, it's fun talking about Hacks, a show that is not really typically our normal forte, but I am excited to get back into some Marvel with Agatha all along. And there's something else starting pretty soon. There's Skeleton Crew, and there's something that's coming out. I know it's important that we're going to have to watch and talk about. And I
Okay.
can't quite remember
Is it
what
DC?
it is.
Something
I
from
don't think
DC?
so. I mean, Creature Commando comes out later in the year, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
No, there's something. I just can't think about what it is, but I'm sure I'll remember it as soon as the podcast stops recording.
Well, hey, and we're talking about maybe reviewing the movie that just dropped on Netflix, Rebel Ridge, from the same
Yes,
director as
yes.
Green Book. I will say, when you watch this, the main character, what I want you to ask yourself while you're watching this is, Jon Stewart?
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, my name is Donovan Thompson,
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
and we have spoken.